Hi, everybody. I'm really excited about this. Today I'm here with Paul Daniels, who is part of Paul Daniels and Linsey Daniels, of the Linsey's team here, or the Daniels team here in Austin. And they run a six-figure real estate business, and they focus on conscious, friendly real estate. And he'll explain some more about that later on, about his business and how they do kind of that little edge that makes things just a little bit different, but more conscious friendly, which we all need more of. But I pulled Paul in today to focus on negotiation. Paul is an expert at negotiation, and as he was explaining to me before we got started, is that this time of year usually is a down time for real estate agents. And actually, him and his wife tend to have more business. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is because he's so good at what he does. And the big part of that is negotiating the right deal for the clients that he works with. So without any further ado, we're going to kick into it. And I'm going to ask you this really simple question. What quality do you think is the most helpful during any negotiation in your experience?
So that's something Linsey and I both highly focus on. Any negotiating deal, whether it's going to be real estate or even Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, wherever you're at, collaboration is the fundamental rule that you want. A collaborative negotiation goes so much further than combative. So transparency, communication, and collaboration, it always wins out.
So let's dive into that just a little bit. So when you say collaboration, how would you collaborate with somebody that calls off of a postcard or calls off of Facebook and says, all right, is this Paul? I'm interested in selling my house. At that point, you don't really know them. They don't really know you.
Right.
How do you collaborate with somebody?
Well, so that's a great question. And that's how we start negotiations. A lot of times people think negotiations are just at the kind of the table when you start, talking money. As a good salesperson, you really have to negotiate with your client. And in order to negotiate with your client, you need to understand your client and build trust. And so that's where that trust building begins. And so what Linsey and I do is there's something called the DISC profile, personality profile test that we've taken. It's similar to the Myers-Briggs and other in-depth tests to understand personalities. And so there's four fundamental, this makes it pretty simple. As we meet people, the four basic qualities in the DISC profile are DISC. And so I'll break that down real quick. Your D's, someone that's a high D, is a very dominant person. They just kind of want the bottom line, no details, just give me the bottom line. What's the answer? Your I individual is a high influencer. That's basically what mine is. I'm a high I. We like to talk, we like to sell, and we're passionate and kind of animated. And sometimes we'll get carried away with a little bit too much talking. And so I got to watch myself in the Zoom calls even. And then you have your high S's, which my mom, God bless her, she's in high S. She loves peace and quiet, doesn't like change, just wants to be comfortable. Basically a very highly sensing person, kind of sensitive is one way to look at it. And then Linsey, which is kind of cool because she helps balance our business. As I'm more of the talker and the sales, Linsey's a high C, which is compliance. A high C individual is really big on systems and having everything organized. And so by knowing those four key roles, when you come into contact with people, just meeting new friends even, you could kind of understand, how can I connect with them? Maybe how can I observe and mirror them so that they feel comfortable? Because it's not so much about me getting everybody out there and getting business and building clients on that level. I do want people to trust me, and I want to build that relationship. And sometimes if I'm being a little bit loud and I'm talking to someone who's in high S, I might need to, tone it down a bit and be at their level to build the trust.
Yeah, interesting. So it's finding where they're at. So I would assume that in the introduction, you're going to start asking some questions to sort of find out where they are on the spectrum. Give me a handful of, let's say, not necessarily a cold call, but let's say a few introductory questions that you might ask somebody that some of these folks watching would say, oh, I never thought to ask that. But, these are very strategic questions, right? You're asking them to see where they are so you can match them. What would be something you'd say?
And that is a good question, is what kind of questions and how do you develop and generate that communication up front? And what we want to do is ask people open-ended questions. So we can be creative with that.
Kind
Not
of let them
closed-ended
have a little
questions.
bit of, kind of have them a little, give them a little bit of freedom, right? So you can then
Yeah.
find out where they are.
It's very interesting. Asking somebody a closed-ended question, which is basically a yes or no question, it's hard to figure them out. You don't get as far. But when you ask open-ended questions, for instance, like how do you feel, or tell me how you feel, or tell me how you came to that conclusion.
Mm,
When you let people talk,
yeah.
that's key in negotiations. Oftentimes people will reveal more than what they need to. And unfortunately, it also exposes their position with negotiations just by asking them some simple questions.
So in our business, so I run a business called the Actis Group, which is a PR positioning firm. We run into this reverse situation with a lot of civic leaders, where somebody will get up in front of a podium and a reporter will ask them a question. But see, it's the reverse, because if you reveal too much, you
Yeah,
expose that vulnerability, right? So I
right.
think it's very interesting if some of my clients see this or whatever. It's interesting to, maybe they'll be able to say, okay, well, I just learned from Paul that I need to be really careful about how I answer an open-ended question.
Precisely. You want to protect yourself. We call it don't show all your cards. That's kind of, the typical phrase. Now, transparency is key in communication and really building that trust. So depending on what table of negotiating you're at, you might want to kind of hold your cards a little tightly, to you. Or, if you're really wanting to expose that to build trust, then that's fair as well. So just be smart about that.
Yeah, and this is a perfect segue. Okay, so holding your cards close can lead into my next question, which is where does leverage? I love leverage, man. So leverage in business is, it's good, right? So when
Yeah.
you hold, so okay, so let's back up. Let's start from the very beginning. You have that first interaction. You ask them open-ended questions. They start showing their cards, and the leverage is then in your hands, right?
Right,
So where
right.
does leverage play? How do you play with that?
Yeah, so it can come in many different forms. Some of the information that people might expose, we're going to keep it in our back pocket, and we're going to use that as leverage for when it's time to play that card. For instance, we've got a house we're selling. The buyers, so we're representing the seller, and we want to hold their power real tightly and not, move their position anywhere. We want them to get the most amount of money, and we want them to close as quickly as possible. But we also want to do this on a collaborative base with the buyer.
Right.
However, if we know that the buyer, uh, maybe they're a first-time homeowner, maybe they've got an apartment that they've been renting, well, we're scheduled to close in about a month on the house that they're purchasing from us. Um, if we find out that they've already ended their lease, already set a date, a hard date to end their lease, well, they just revealed the fact that they're committed
Uh-huh.
and they have
Yep.
nowhere to go.
Yep.
Now, I'm not going to bring that up front in negotiations, but I'm going to hold that in my back pocket. I'm going to leverage that to my,
Perfect.
basically to my benefit so that I understand their position.
Yes. So understanding their position can just be, I mean, it seems like, okay, let's kind of go through the things I've observed as you're talking. So open-ended questions, observation, and listening, allowing people just to kind of air their grievances, if you will.
Yeah, and it's quite common. People will expose more than they probably should, especially with real estate. Not everybody's trained in this. Linsey and I are both master certified negotiation experts, and
So,
being married, I negotiate daily with my wife. So I have a lot of practice.
yeah, I'm with you. I'd rather have pizza and beer every night too. I'm with you.
Come on.
I mean, come on, how hard can it be? So good stuff. Yeah, and I think sales and negotiation and positioning is part of life in general. If you have a little kid or
Yes.
a wife or somebody at the supermarket, it's like, I mean, one of the coolest interactions I've ever seen is when somebody's bringing, speaking of the supermarket, when somebody's bringing back a cart, it's the easiest sell in the world. Can I take that for you?
Absolutely. I love it.
So easy, right? But
Yeah.
maybe they might say, no, I'm going to come back. You don't know that, right? So there's always that element of risk. So let's get into risk here. So in negotiation, if you hold too much to your chest, you leverage too heavily or at the wrong time, you run the risk of blowing the negotiation. So what are some of the steps? This is very key very important thing for some of my folks to pay attention to. What are some of the preemptive steps you do to kind of mitigate the risk of blowing the deal?
So how to keep from blowing the deal?
Not necessarily keep from, but what are the steps you put in place, or some things that you kind of hold in your back pocket in case it kind of goes south, and you can kind of pull it out and say, wait a second, I got one more option for you.
Right. Okay. So, and that's communicating with our client, whether it be the buyer or seller. Maybe our client is a buyer. Maybe they have a little bit of money saved up and set aside that they are willing to put forward, but we want to, look out for their best interests and negotiate for them. And we want them to keep as much as possible in case something goes wrong.
Sure.
But we might leverage that again and, keep that as something that we can bring to the table. If the seller wants to back out for some reason, we might come back with a little more money, time. It's interesting that oftentimes people might want a lease back, which means they need to sell their house in order to buy another house. But if we're on the buy side, we understand that we're buying a home from somebody who's building a house down the street, in another neighborhood. Well, if it's a new construction or even another deal, it may take time for them to move out. And so by us saying, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to offer this price, but we also want to allow you some time to get your move completed and your other house prepared. So there's areas like that that's not so much a monetary amount, but it's a different way of helping and collaborating to look out for the interests of all parties.
You hit on a real important element there that I think people misuse, abuse, and don't even use, and that is time.
Yeah.
It's get the deal done. It's like, well, maybe you can leverage time to your advantage.
It's often overlooked, like you said, and a lot of times time is more important than money to most people.
Or the combination of two is deadly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can, really get somebody out of a jam and get it for a good price, it's like they just sign right here. Not a big deal.
Right.
So let me ask you a little bit about value. All right. So when you're negotiating, do you present everything up at front? Go, here's a bunch of value, or do you kind of trickle it out? There's a lot of different styles. What is your personal approach to the value proposition part of the negotiation process?
Well, one way that we like to kind of have a script for our value proposition in negotiating is to try to win a client, maybe at an open house. We're at an open house and some people walk in and they're interested in the house, but hey, they're just kind of looking. They're not really looking to buy that particular house.
Right.
Most people don't buy the house at an open house anyways. That's a little tip. But
really?
Anyhow,
interesting.
Yeah, about 1% people buy the actual house.
They're going for the free food.
Yeah. But what we want to do is bring a value proposition of, it's a little bit of some sales, I guess. But Linsey and I, like I mentioned before, that we do run a conscious real estate business. And so we want to identify how does that look and how is that a value that this particular person can gain from. What value do we have over another realtor doing an open house down the street? And so having a value proposition prepared, having a niche and spearheading a movement is really in our best interest because most other real estate agents aren't doing that. They're kind of going out there turning the deals. And so we've honed in our niche to have a pretty detailed conscious real estate niche that's going to really help our clients in all of their levels of stress, new lifestyle, and what their goals are. And so that's where we bring our value proposition. And there's different ways to pitch that because time is of the essence oftenly. So we have to be careful and we have to strategize on maybe we bring that value proposition when we meet later at a second appointment, at a buyer appointment at our office or a listing.
Time, right? Again, with time, right? And where to place that. So you hit on, having different or better or more value than the realtor down the street. So let's say there's 100% margin here. What percentage goes towards having more valuable than the realtor next to you or having value that matches the needs of the customer? Which one, where would you float? You have 100, you have 100%. Which one?
Yeah. So you've got, everybody knows a real estate agent. They're brothers. Everybody's in real estate. So having something
good at it though. Let's make it clear.
Yeah. Yeah. So still having something to present or to provide a solution for that person's needs I'd say is more of the 80% side, because so real estate transactions, there's a lot of emotion attached, much more than logic. We identify what our needs are, but let's just face it, it's a lot of money. People's houses are their homes. It's a big change. The three highest stressors in life are death, divorce, and moving. And so with that,
I agree.
yeah, with that much emotion tied to real estate, connecting with people, providing them with a service, solutions for their needs, and doing it in a way that's going to be a little more catered to their needs, it just always wins. Now, and that's where we want to negotiate and try to match their style so that we can earn their trust.
Right.
Again, if I'm too loud bringing this to the table with maybe a gentleman that's kind of a little more meek and humble, I need to tone down and try to, meet him at his level so that I can earn his trust and fully explain how we're going to help him meet his goals.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I would say that, when it comes to moving, you mentioned, what was it, death taxes? No, what was it?
Yeah, Texas. It's death, divorce, and moving are the three top stressors.
So then your major value proposition for these folks is they never have to do it again.
Yeah, well, people move on average.
Really, ideally you find in the ideal home, it's like, look, once you get here, you're done. No more moving, Right. So I think you hit on some great points there, understanding what they want, what they need, the emotional attachments to those, and then where your product or service fits into that.
Right.
And that gives you actually some legs up on the negotiation part. It gives you some leverage because you're doing what most people aren't doing right off the bat.
Right. And it's so amazing when we build that trust with our clients. It's so fun. Linsey and I are the master negotiators. We've been trained in this.
Yeah.
But when we sit with our clients and they start masterminding with us, the team collaboration is amazing. It's just so beautiful that we pick up so much from our clients and they don't even realize.
Yeah, they're selling themselves.
Yeah, Thomas, you said it earlier. We're born negotiating. When we're babies, we're crying. We want a candy bar. We negotiate with our parents, and the louder I cry, the more chances I have of getting it. So everybody negotiates, and they just haven't tapped into it yet.
Yeah, that's good. When you get them collaborating, you got them on your side of the table.
Yeah.
When they're more working with you. And so I have two more things I want to hit on, and this is a perfect segue. So when do you kind of know that the tipping point starts to happen? When you feel that the negotiation is going great and it's going to happen, what are some indicators? Is it a feeling? Are there metrics involved? What are some things that when that starts to tip, you're like, this is a done deal, it's just process from here on out?
It's tonality. We call our I won't say competitors, but the person on the opposite end, if it's a buyer or seller, and we kind of say, hey, here's where we're at. I'm speaking on behalf of my client, and this is what they're looking for. This is what they want. And then when the response can either be a knee jerk or again, a collaboration of like, okay, I hear you. Yeah, that sounds fair. Let's work on that. I think we can work this out. The best words when I hear, let's make this a win-win, usually it's going in a good direction because, let's just be honest. Everybody wants to close a deal. Everybody wants to move forward in life.
Yeah.
And again, when we start off with a collaborative effort, it's so much more powerful, and usually we come to the table and the response is what we're looking for. But that's when we start to understand, okay, here's where we're at. They responded with a curse word and a knee jerk, or they responded with, hey, okay, I understand that. That makes sense. Let's talk further.
So you're looking for certain verbiage and tonality from them that they're relaxed and they're like, yeah, this makes sense. Let's, they're kind of already there in their head. It's just, they got to go through the motions.
Yeah, exactly. That's yeah.
And I think that's built up through rapport, and, they like you and they're ready to move forward. So that's great. So my final thing is, and we really got to it, but I want you to explain your value prop when it comes to your conscious real estate. Because I've never heard of this before, and I think people would be very interested to hear this.
Yeah, and conscious, the word means with knowledge, basically. It's awareness. So if we have a buyer client, I'm a buyer specialist and Linsey's a listing specialist. And when I'm on the MLS looking at homes and clients are telling me what they're looking for, and they point one out that they kind of like, I'm going to be there to say, hey, looking at the map, you're right next to a high school, and that's great and all, but are you okay with 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. marching band practice outside your window? Because it gets
That's fair.
fairly loud.
That's a fair
Uh,
question.
and then over here on this side, we got some railroad tracks. It's identifying little details like that.
Mm.
And again, the biggest thing that we're conscious of is stress. Stress is so terrible. It's a big killer. We want to just minimize that as much as possible. Traffic's the worst. We all can admit we don't like traffic. So we're just going to be intentional about finding out, is there a solution for what you're looking for in a location where you want to be that might be a little bit better? And so by us bringing all the information and I guess all the data about what their needs are, we can figure out where they're going to be dealing with the least amount of stress and in a position to where they have a high return on investment on their property. Sounds pretty basic, and I can go into much more detail, but because of time, really it's just being awareness and much more honed in with what our clients' needs are. And
Love it.
the final thing is bridging the gap between health and wealth. That's our big conscious proposition, because people want to protect their wealth, they want to gain their wealth, but we also want to protect and gain our health. In conscious real estate, Linsey and I have been through quite a bit on our end with our past, that we've got so much knowledge. We want to help people have a better life with their health and their wealth.
I absolutely love this, and what people can take away from this is kind of put this in their own context. That if you're building a value proposition, going in and negotiating with clients and maybe other businesses, whatever business you're in all the time, maybe constituents, think about your value prop and then everything around it. Because the value proposition for you is really a home, right? But then you add on to that, look, we're going to look around the home and make your life better. Not just your home and make a sale, but make your life better. And sometimes with these people, if they stay in their home for 10, 20, 30 years, they're going to make their entire life better, you know?
Yeah. And it's not about a house or a home. It's about your whole lifestyle. It's your future. It's your return on that investment. And let's find a way to build your health with more real estate purchases. You know, if that's an option. And there's typically are options for that. Just people don't know. So we try to educate and help people with that.
Well, you know what's cool about that is the customer doesn't think that way.
No.
They're not ready for it. They're like, oh, I just want a home. And they're like, well, you know, there's train tracks. Oh, I didn't even think of that. So people can really take a lot from this and say, okay, what am I offering in a negotiation, and how can I add ancillary value to increase their entire life?
Absolutely.
So if you had, and this is the final thing, so if you had 3 tips on being an expert negotiator, what would they be? Go for it.
Oh, gosh. If you want to be an expert negotiator, ask a ton of questions.
Okay.
Listen to the answers and be collaborative.
Love it. Very good. Paul, I'm so thankful for this.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you for being here. There is going to be links below for you guys to all his stuff. He's a really nice guy. And as you can tell, he's thinking holistically. So what I want you guys to take from this is think holistically when you're negotiating. Not just a one-on-one interaction, not just a win-win even, but holistically. How is everybody going to profit, benefit, be healthier, ripple effect throughout their lives? Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
have a blessed day.
Thank you.